Next on our agenda is we will have Corinne Gilroy back again, talking about what they're doing at Mountain State Vincent University. So, since you've been introduced once, I don't think you need any more introduction, but thank you very much. Uh, so you can go ahead, and if you have anything to share, you can. Otherwise, you can start.
Sure, I am going to share a PowerPoint here. Just give me a second.
Sure.
It'll probably look familiar. I put everything into one PowerPoint for today. So we're going to skip these slides. We've already been there. And I'm going to move on to accessible space and sharing at MSVU. So here at the Mount, we've made a lot of changes in recent years that I'm really proud of, and I know that the whole team here at the library and the Mount community at large is very proud of. Just little things often that are hopefully making a big difference for various demographics of our student population. So space improvements. I love thinking about the space of the library and library as space. And of course, now that we have a learning commons in the library, it's very much a socializing space for students, and a lot more students spend a lot more time here than they did in years past. So various improvements to our space include we have more and more automatic door buttons showing up around campus, including our main doors. And we had a set of non-accessible doors removed from our back hallway, because ironically those non-accessible doors were leading to a hallway that had accessible washrooms. So that was a barrier that definitely had to be overcome for the sake of just respecting students' needs. We now have a height adjustable workstation for library patrons who are power chair users. So it's height adjustable by just lightly gripping kind of a button or a lever underneath the main surface of the desk, and it moves up and down. Of course, depending on someone's mobility, they may need a library staff member to assist them, but it's meant to accommodate more than just the standard wheelchair or chair. It's also meant to accommodate power chairs, which of course can be much higher than a standard wheelchair. And we have a workstation now that also has a really cool kind of telescopic arm for the keyboard tray as well as the monitor. So if a student really needs to pull those a lot closer to them, if they're low vision but they still prefer to read using their eyes versus a screen reader that's dictating to them, that can make our website and various software applications a little bit more accessible. And we have another dedicated workstation that's a little more centered around BVI, or blind and visually impaired patrons. So this workstation has Zoom text that loads as soon as you log into the computer. The monitor is quite a bit larger than our other monitors. It might be 22 inches maybe, and there's also a digital magnifier sitting next to that workstation that it's turned on with the click of one quite visible red button, and you can just set a text on it, move it around, and the zoom is adjustable. It's not connected to the computer. It's kind of an autonomous reading device, and I have a couple pictures to show everyone in a moment as well. And one of our newest additions is, and this came from a student request, which I love getting student requests related to accessibility, is a high contrast keyboard. So the keys themselves are bright yellow, and the writing on the keys, so the letters and symbols, are a nice dark rich black. So it's very high contrast, and the font is quite large on them as well. And we have those at our quote-unquote accessible workstations that I already mentioned, but we also have one available for loan. So if a student wants to use one with their laptop, or they want to take it to their preferred workstation in the library, they're certainly welcome to do that. And we had a request recently for a magnifying glass, and so we've added a few magnifying glasses available on short-term loan. So I just want to show you a couple pictures here. So these are two of our accessible workstations. So first I'll draw your attention to the photo on the right. So this is our height adjustable desk that can accommodate power chair users. The keyboard tray pulls in and out, and you can't see it from the photo, and it would be terribly small to fit onto this screen in Skype anyway. But there is a little lever underneath one side of the keyboard tray that, when it's clicked, the whole desk glides up and down, and the height difference is it's probably about a foot, so there's a considerable clearance if you need it. And so that's why I have one little red circle there on the right, and of course you can see the bright yellow keyboard. But as well, the other bright circle that just seems to be on the carpet tiles on the floor is just a reminder to me to point out that we deliberately put this workstation in an area where there's a lot of clearance on all sides for someone with a power chair to maneuver. So this particular desk, as in the actual piece of equipment, the furniture, was previously located in an area where it wasn't accessible because the space was quite cramped. So we deliberately moved this desk and set it all up again to an area where there's several feet of clearance on all sides of the desk, so someone can reverse, turn, and not worry about bumping into other students, hitting students' book bags, things like that. So that was really important to kind of just consider how much space was needed for that workstation. And the picture on the left is the station that we have that's set up a little more to work for students who are blind and visually impaired. And we have, so the little red circle on the far left is actually just an example of the sign that we put at each of our accessible workstations. And it just says, and it's difficult to read here, but it says priority seating for library patrons with disabilities. And those new signs came out of a student request as well, that they would just like to know that they don't have to really confront other students if they happen to be sitting there, which of course other students are welcome to sit there if those workstations aren't needed by someone who has a specific disability that they're set up to accommodate. But that sign being there can help to kind of grease the wheels of a conversation that might be a little bit awkward or uncomfortable depending on a student's confidence level. And also at this workstation, the other red circle, so nearer to the center of the slide, is just the magnifier equipment. So you can see it's and there's a flatbed scanner beside that as well. So the magnifier is a standalone piece of hardware. You click it on with one button. It's very bright. You can change the magnification. You can set a book down on it open and glide the tray around and see different parts of the book quite easily. And it kind of reminds me of older microfilm machines where you get that very kind of visual tactile magnification, but it's running through a machine. So anyway, I like it quite a bit. I don't see students using it that often. I think most students are working with computer-oriented stuff, but it's definitely there if it's needed. And let's see. This slide is about accessibility teamwork at the MSVU library. So rather than me talking about physical space and facilities, which I could probably do forever, this is equally important. So we, at the Mount, and I alluded to this in my previous presentation from ever so many minutes ago, that in Access Services, we try to make it the default procedure to at least add OCR to any scanned document. Of course, again, we prefer to use documents that are born digital whenever possible. So if we have a print journal and we have an online version as well, and a student needs, a student's made a document delivery request for one chapter of that, one article from that journal or one chapter from a book that we have digitally, we're going to use the native digital copy whenever possible, but that's not always possible, obviously. So we at least run OCR once we scan these documents before we send them off to patrons, whether it's students or faculty, without making any assumptions about, regardless of whether we know that that person may or may not have a print-related disability. We just do that as a matter of course. It also just helps anyone who needs to text search, right? If you just need to search for certain terms in a chapter, it can be very handy. So it's a bit of a universal design thing as well. And our accessibility services office at the Mount recently relocated to EMF, which is the library building, the E. Margaret Fulton Center at the Mount. And someone in an earlier presentation mentioned that building connections and lines of communication between the library and accessibility services can really benefit students, and I've definitely seen that come to pass. And that relates to the last main point here, which is that we have a new accessible text committee. I don't think we really have an official name yet, but that's what I think of it as, is that it's a group of people on campus who are stakeholders when it comes to making text and making learning materials more accessible to students who have disabilities. And that committee includes representatives from Accessibility Services, from the print shop, from the library, and from the Teaching and Learning Center and Distance Learning. And we've had a couple of meetings now. We got together to really try to start to clarify workflow and duties to avoid duplicated effort, because a lot of processes related to accessibility do overlap with pieces of technology. They overlap with the services provided by the library, and so it's not always easy to know exactly who's responsible for doing what for students, and you don't want to leave any student in the lurch, but you also don't want to create extra work for staff. You want staff to be able to use their time efficiently to help as many students as possible. So we've put together a shared Excel tracker that's on OneDrive, so we can record requests for accessible texts and hopefully, again, duplicate less effort there. And along with that shared Excel tracker in the same folder is a repository to add scanned ebooks or scanned chapters and texts that are acquired digitally from publishers so that we can provide those to students with print disabilities. And our first presenter of the day mentioned the Marrakesh Treaty and the 2016 update to the Copyright Act. And this project of kind of cross-pollination of accessible text is really very much tied into making our university a little more Marrakesh compliant and more compliant in terms of that latest update to the Copyright Act in 2016. And of course, the real end goal is to make sure that more students get more of the stuff they need more quickly, which can be a real challenge for students who have disabilities, because they often have different course loads and they have other responsibilities that they're dealing with as well. So that's the end of that for me, and I'm happy to take questions on that one as well. Or more questions about Adobe, if those are still lingering, I can certainly. I know, it keeps me up at night. I don't know about you guys.
Hi, Corinne. It's Suzanne.
Hi.
Can you hear Corinne?
Can you hear Suzanne? Yes.
Hi. So I just was wondering about the when you're scanning articles and you're making sure that they're OCR compliant. Is that being done at Access Services Desk, or are you doing that through document delivery? Or both?
It's both. So my reserves team here at Access Services is 2 people, and our document delivery team is 2 people as well. And we've just built that into workflow. If they're scanning a document for a student, whether it's going to go up on a Moodle site for a class, so it's going to be used for 30 students, or whether it's being sent to 1 student for a document delivery request. Just making sure that you open it in Adobe and you at least run OCR on it so that it can be scanned by a screen reader. That's just part of our workflow now. So it's not really done at the Access Services Desk, because when Edith and Ainsley, our reserves crew, when they're working on reserves requests, and a lot of those are they're online reserves for our Moodle course sites, they're doing that from their own workstation. So it's not really happening at the Access Services Desk, but definitely 100% within the Access Services team.
Right. And how long have you been doing that? Just out of curiosity.
Oh, when I started at the Mount in 2013, I had previously been working at APSI, the special education library, and of course all we did was alternate formats. That was our bread and butter. So one of my very first questions my first week was, are we OCRing these? and so it's just kind of continued on from there. So I started, Edith and I started doing it in reserves, and then of course my responsibilities changed as I moved into another role, and we really kind of rolled it out across the entire team. So
wonderful. That's great. Thank you, Corinne.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Anybody else? Any other questions online? You can either do the chat or you can unmute yourself and ask.
Or email me.
Well, thank you very much, Corinne. Another great session.
My pleasure.
And I think everybody is really excited to start going out and trying some of these things and adapting some in their own workplaces.